The Tibetan Book of the Dead, also known as the Bardrobe, is an ancient text in Tibetan Buddhist tradition that guides individuals through the intermediate state between death and rebirth. It is recited to help individuals navigate hallucinations and visions during death. The book offers a unique perspective on consciousness and the human experience of death and rebirth, teaching that consciousness is not limited to the body and death is a transition to a new state. Origins can be traced back to the 8th century, when Tibetan King Song Detsen directed Indian Buddhist master Padmasambhava to bring Buddhism to Tibet. The Tibetan Book of the Dead, a hidden treasure of Tibetan Buddhism, is not considered a traditional scripture but has spread globally. Translated into English by W.I. Evans Wentz in 1927, it has been revised and retranslated by Francesca Fremantle and Kujiam Trungpa in 1975. The Dalai Lama, the spiritual head of Tibetan Buddhism, emphasized the book's usefulness in guiding people on how to approach death and the period after death. The teachings have been used as inspiration in everyday life, not just during the process of dying or after death. In the 1960s, the Tibetan Book of the Dead gained popularity with the Western counterculture movement, inspiring works of art, literature and film, including Pink Floyd's album The Dark Side of the Moon and the Beatles' groundbreaking single Tomorrow Never Knows. The Tibetan Book of the Dead has gained a wider audience in Western culture through its incorporation into practices like yoga and meditation. The book teaches that when we die, our consciousness, or mind, is no longer associated with the body and is floating free of it. This may seem like a good thing, especially if the body has been diseased or in terrible pain. Tibetan Buddhists have a saying that in life, the mind makes you end, meaning that while we were alive with the physical body, we were limited in our ability to act or release thoughts. In death, consciousness is loosed from the body, allowing us to experience the dream realm version of our desires. Tibetan Buddhists emphasize the importance of purifying the mind while alive, based on gratitude, compassion, kindness, loving thoughts, and deep recognition of the inherent empty ground of mind. This purification leads to the formation of mind forms and dream realms during death and dying. These mind forms are called bardos, formed by karmic energies or repeated thoughts accumulated during one's lifetime. The Tibetan Book of the Dead guides individuals through these bardos, helping them recognize the unreality of their thoughts and become aware of their radiant, primal, and empty consciousness. The consciousness of the deceased passes through a series of bardos between their death and rebirth, lasting 49 days before being reborn into another body. During this time, the deceased experiences hallucinations and visions. The Tibetan Book of the Dead teaches that visions caused by karmic energies accumulated during an individual's previous lifetimes can be positive or negative depending on their past actions. The ultimate goal is to recognize and release these visions, leading to a better birth and enlightenment. The Book of the Dead is divided into 3 main sections: the Bardo of Life, the Bardo of Dying, and the Bardo of Dharma Nirvana. Each section is further divided into sub-bardos, which describe and map various experiences and visions that may occur during dying, after death, or rebirth. These sub-bardos are not necessarily distinct stages, but rather different aspects that may arise at any time during the process of dying after death or rebirth. A person experiences different qualities of hallucinations or visions during the Bardo of Dying, such as peacefulness, clarity, detachment from the body, and lightness or weightlessness. These experiences share similarities with reports known as NDEs or near-death experiences. In the initial stages of dying, individuals may experience physical sensations such as cold pressure, pain, movement, sounds, or voices beyond the initial sabatos. In the Bardo of Dharma Nirvana, individuals may experience hallucinations or visions depending on whether they are in the clear light of reality or the ground luminosity. The most auspicious stage for improved rebirth or enlightenment is passing through the Bardo of Dharma Nirvana, as described in the Tibetan Book of the Dead. Near-death experiences such as cardiac arrest or serious accidents often lead to a profound sense of peace and not being limited to body-loving encounters with deceased loved ones or spiritual beings. Researchers have noted striking similarities between the descriptions of Endes and the Bardos described in the Tibetan Book of the Dead. Endes and Bardos share a common sense of peace and well-being, as depicted in the Tibetan Book of the Dead. Endes experience profound peace and acceptance, even amidst physical pain or fear. They often feel at one with the universe or higher power. Both NDs and bardos describe consciousness expanding beyond the body's limits, with the former experiencing a detached state of being. NDs report encountering deceased loved ones and spiritual beings, which are comforting and reassuring. They also experience radiant light, a sense of being outside of time and space, and access to profound insights. NDs in the Tibetan Book of the Dead are more real and vivid than everyday reality. Those who return to the bardo of living after experiencing a near-death experience report profound insights and wisdom that have had a profound impact on their lives. Reading the Tibetan Book of the Dead in conjunction with Western culture also provides this great understanding, wisdom, and value. The Tibetan Book of the Dead has greatly influenced Western civilization. The book has been widely accepted by Western artists, writers, intellectuals, and musicians. Due to its understanding of the essence of consciousness and the human condition, the idea that the ego, or sense of separate self, is ephemeral and illusionary is known as ego death. And it is one of the central concepts in the Tibetan Book of the Dead. It says that, in order to be realized, has to be viewed as false or unreal. This concept impacted those Western intellectuals and artists on creative inspiration and wisdom can be found in the Tibetan Book of the Dead. One well-known example is Timothy Tybert, a well-known controversial psychologist and hero of the counterculture who is best remembered for being a proponent of using LSD to achieve spiritual enlightenment. For their studies on LSD and other psychedelics, Leary, Ralph Metzner, and Richard Alpert, later known as RAM, used the Tibetan Book of the Dead as a guide. The Tibetan Book of the Dead is a significant source of information on the effects of LSD, a substance that is believed to strip away ego defenses and induce psychological ego death and rebirth. Western artists, writers, and musicians have used the book to create works of art, such as French composer Pierre Henry's 1963 electroacoustic ballet work, Le Voyage, Finnish composer Eric Bagman's 1974 work, Bardo Todor, Philip K. Dick's 1969 novel, Ubuk, and Sogyar Rinpoche's 1991 book, The Tibetan Book of Living and Dying. An updated version of the Tibetan Book of the Dead was published in 2017. George Saunders' novel, Lincoln in the Bardo, a bestseller, tells the story of Abraham Lincoln grieving his son's death while passing through bardos described in the Tibetan Book of the Dead. Bruce Joel Rubin's film Jacob Slatter is considered a modern interpretation of the book. Enter the Void, a 2009 French film, was based on the Tibetan text. TV shows Twin Peaks reference the book in dying episodes, highlighting its impact on Western culture. Its teachings emphasize the significance of realizing the true nature of reality and provide wise guidance on how to navigate the intermediate state between deaths and rebirth for those interested in exploring spiritual and philosophical questions about the nature of consciousness and the meaning of life. The Tibetan Book of the Dead, despite its ancient origins, is still relevant and important to read today. It offers a unique perspective on the nature of consciousness and the human experience of death and rebirth. Its teachings emphasize the significance of realizing the true nature of reality and provide wise guidance on how to navigate the intermediate state between deaths and rebirth for those interested in exploring spiritual and philosophical questions about the nature of consciousness and the meaning of life. In addition, the Tibetan Book of the Dead is a significant literary and cultural work that is part of the iconic text stock. In terms of spiritual practice, Tibetan Buddhism has been crucial to the development of Tibetan culture. Reading the Tibetan Book of the Dead offers priceless insight into both Tibet's larger Buddhist tradition and its history and culture. The Tibetan Book of the Dead also highlights the value of compassion and mindfulness, encouraging both the living and the dead to develop these virtues and to have compassion for all living things. Therefore, the Tibetan Book of the Dead offers counsel not only for the dead and dying, but also for the living. By reading and internalizing its wisdom, one can develop a more compassionate and thoughtful way of living, as well as a better knowledge of the nature of reality.